So welcome everyone again. So it's episode 3 of our podcast at Adapt. The purpose for this podcast is just to discover the stories of founders, owners and leaders of small businesses. The challenges that they face in the work that they do, some of the creative ways in which they've overcome these challenges, some of the epic fails that they've had to learn from, all the while keeping people and culture at the core of everything. Speaking of culture, that's the topic of today's episode, and I'm very lucky to have our guest Michelle Chin with me today. Michelle is the organisational leader for people and culture at ERGT. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We're lucky again to be in this great room with this fantastic wall in the building of another SME, Sentient Computing, immersive tech company, a company in our community, which is wonderful. So they've been gracious enough to give us their space again.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool wall.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the backstory actually about the wall. I need to ask Doug for sure. So Michelle, I'd like to, I'm going to start with a couple of questions, then we'll delve into a bit of your backstory.
Sure.
But just to get to know the person on the other side of the mic, wondering if you want to share with me one of your favourite indulgences in life.
So my favourite indulgence, and has been for a long time, is a good, deep, relaxing remedial massage.
Awesome. That sounds... have you got a favourite place?
Yeah, sure. I go to a little Asian lady in Morley who's definitely a lot stronger than she looks.
Brilliant. And how regularly are you able to take that time?
Not as often as I'd like.
Okay. And a life hack, one of your favourite life hacks?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's probably just prepping in the morning, having a bit of me time before the kids get up and start asking me for things, spending a bit of time outside in my garden, drinking coffee, just watching the world go by. Yeah. Trying not to look at my phone, but don't really do that very well.
To put your phone somewhere inside the house when you go outside?
No, I usually take it out with me.
There's the trap. And what do you see when you sit in your garden?
Yeah, so I see my garden that I, first of all, killed the garden that was in there when I moved in, but replaced it with succulents. Yeah. And I guess the hack was...
A lot harder to kill succulents.
A lot harder to kill, and I also got them all for free as well. Yeah, those... Oh, just start going on Facebook and those buy nothing pages. And I think when you get them for free, you're more prepared to experiment with them. And if it dies, it dies.
We're on our local buy nothing page and they're brilliant. They're such amazing sharing. It's a great sharing economy in these suburbs.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is amazing.
Michelle, I'd love to just dive into a bit of your backstory. Where did you come from and how did you end up here today as an org leader at ERGT?
Sure. So I started my career in recruitment and probably specialised in that for about 15 years. Yeah. Always looked at HR and went, or people and culture and went, I don't want to deal with that.
Why?
So, I guess, I saw the employee relations side of it and the industrial relations side of it and just went, I don't want to be dealing with people's problems. Recruitment, you deliver happy news, you give people jobs. Yeah. Sort of steered clear for it for a bit. But then I had an amazing leader who gave me opportunities to do secondments and sort of try before I bought. And I actually found that, I guess it spread my wings, enabled me to get involved in not just the employee relations stuff, but a lot of other things. And so I guess my career took a turn into just a more generalist people and culture space. Yep. And then I guess because I've always loved leadership, sort of progressed into leadership roles.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I had the privilege of meeting you just under a couple of years ago, just before you made a transition to ERGT. Yeah. Where you took the role of organisational leader of people and cultures. What made that transition happen for you?
I guess I was working for another Adapt client and having experienced that sort of previously working for your, big brands, employers that have thousands of people in it, went to a smaller organisation that worked with Adapt and finally found, I guess, a philosophy that I've always believed in, and so it fit really well. And then ERGT, the opportunity came, was advertised on Adapt's LinkedIn page.
Oh, yes.
I didn't see it otherwise.
Yeah.
And I guess it was an opportunity to work for a larger business, but still using Adapt. And I guess having worked at ESM and also worked for another customer as a implementer, made the decision I would never work for another organisation that wasn't part of that community. And ERGT, bigger organisation, for me to be able to do some different things as well, and really be part of that leadership team. So it's not just, yes, my role is focused on people and culture, but to be able to have that input and influence into the whole company.
The whole system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so tell us a bit more about ERGT. What do you guys do?
Sure. Yeah. So we're an RTO, a registered training organisation, focused on safety and emergency response training, and very much into that experiential training. So we have a lot of really cool toys and kit.
Some epic facilities.
We do have some epic facilities, a pool that, you sit in a helicopter module and you get spun upside down, confined space training, set things on fire, get them out.
Full-scale helicopter on a platform inside a building.
Absolutely,
large big buildings that you put on fire and send people in there. Amazing.
It's the facility in Perth particularly is very impressive. But we also have centres across the country as well.
And so ERGT, is quite a large SME. How many people have you guys got in the business?
We've got about 230 people. Mixture of full-time, part-time, casuals.
Fantastic. And you serve customers across Australia? Yeah,
absolutely. So oil and gas, mining, Defence Force is some of our sort of client base.
Fantastic. And the topic for our chat today is culture, seeing as that it's something that you are passionate about and something that you apply your hand to professionally all day. What I thought would be fun to do is first explore with you, how do you define culture?
So in short, I define culture, and many people have said it's how we do things around here. But it's much more than that.
How we do things.
How we do things around here. But, it's much more than that. It's that subtle messaging that happens. So you could have vision and values on, a wall or on the Adapt platform. But it's, how the types of people that we hire, the types of people that we develop, how we exit people. It's that subtle messaging around how we make decisions, how we have conversations with people as well, even those tough conversations.
Why are you attracted to that as a discipline in your professional life?
Because for me, I guess people are an organisation's biggest asset. They're also their competitive advantage as well often. So you can have a great product, but if you don't have the people behind it, then it will only get so far.
Yeah. And have you had personal experiences of that where maybe the ability for a great product to transcend was hampered by a poor performing culture?
Yes, and probably poor leadership. Toxic leadership, leadership where people don't feel that they have trust. They don't feel safe.
I suppose it sounds like that was a bit of a catalyst that sent you down this journey.
Absolutely. I think in people and culture, I talk to my colleagues in people and culture that work for your traditional corporate organisation. And I listen to their issues and what they deal with, and it's the same thing. I guess this community is different in the way that they approach, the whole philosophy around trust and psychological safety. And it is a big topic at the moment. I think COVID's really elevated that topic as well as some, legislative changes when it comes to psychosocial hazards. But it sort of continues, we're already on that journey already. We're probably already exceeding some of that stuff.
Amazing. So what I'd like to explore is your approach to building a healthy and thriving work culture, especially in an organisation the size of ERGT.
Yeah. Look, I think it comes down to trust and that, belief. People have the intent of good, Not many people come to work wanting to do a bad job.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So I think it's about trust, and, listening to people, and CBTs are a good way to do that and understand what matters most to people. But it's also about, following through and doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. Okay, so there's two things I'd like to just hone in on there a little bit. And feel free to refer to your notes anytime. Yeah. You started with that it's saying it's all about trust. So how do you go about building trust in an organisation with 230 plus people? That sounds like a difficult job.
It definitely can be. I think ERGT has been around for almost 30 years and I think some of that trust has come through the experience that people have had through that time. And, trying to not just meet a benchmark because the legislation tells you to do it, but I guess having that philosophy of, well, we don't just want to meet the minimum, we want to do more than that. And so that sort of comes with time. And I guess we've grown quite a bit in the last 18 months, 2 years. And so we've got an element of people who know that, but we've also got an element of people who don't know that.
Yeah.
And their experience of an employer comes from, those corporate type environments where it's very top down as well. So I guess over the last 18 months, we've been on a journey called the ERGT way.
Yeah.
And that is about trust and psychological safety. That is about gathering the wisdom of the crowd, listening to people and what they've got to say, gathering those inputs that will help inform our annual objectives and our quarterly objectives. So it's not just, I guess, the leadership layer making some of those decisions. We're gathering inputs into those to inform them. So
if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like you guys are trying to build an environment where your people start to trust each other and the business, and they feel safe enough to share thoughts and ideas and inputs, and then your leadership team try to collect as much of the inputs and as much of the data and wisdom from everybody in the organization, and then rely on that to form your strategy.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
And I think as a team leader, for example, it's that balance of also the feedback of the group versus the one squeaky wheel as well. So balancing that out too. I think that's an important, filter, I guess, that needs to be applied as well.
So then, interesting little segue, how do you handle a situation where you might have a one squeaky wheel scenario on a team?
Yeah, I guess it's about having those honest conversations as well. So, it's difficult. I'm not just as a people and culture person, but as a leader of a team as well. It is hard to have those conversations, and sometimes people won't like what you've got to say as well. But I think that's better than not addressing that at all.
Not sharing, not giving that feedback.
Yeah, I guess, in a CBT, it's that opportunity for an employee to talk about their motivators. And sometimes we can address those and sometimes we can't.
Yeah.
And so then what next? And being able to have that open and honest conversation. We can't always give everything to everyone. But I think people are appreciative of that if you explain the why and you take the time to give them that feedback rather than not address it at all.
Okay. Well, that leads me to the second point I just want to hone into, which is the CBT. So, explain what that means to you. What is a CBT?
Yeah.
How do you use it? What does that mean for ERGT to apply that way of doing things?
Sure. So CBT, I guess in essence, is us trying to find out what matters most to our people.
Yeah. And then just for reference, CBT refers to a career evaluation tool or a career evaluation assessment. And that's an exercise that you do with your people where you try to understand their aspirations, what matters to them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So they're motivators, mostly intrinsic motivators, things like personal fit, work-life balance, that professional fit as far as their skills and experience, how they like to be acknowledged, how they like, their feedback on training and mentoring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you roll that out practically in the business?
So we started with I guess the initial start was organic. So the organisational leadership team having it with their leaders, and then we designed cultural cohorts.
Okay.
And so the experience was organic and through experience and learning through that. And the ADAPT platform has some really good guidance questions in how to have that. And so they did a few rounds practicing that. And then we did some training earlier this year. We talked about, what's the real reason for a CBT, just understanding what matters most to people, how to have those conversations, so explaining why we have them, giving time for the employee to understand what each motivator is so that they're responding in a way, showing showing what we do with that data as well, so that, the feedback that you gives us that ability to have a look at what's important across the whole organisation.
Okay.
And that can help inform what we do from a people strategy perspective, how we might design annual and quarterly objectives as well. But also, what do you do when somebody raises something and you can't deliver on that, giving them the feedback and the importance of that feedback. And really it's a tool that will help us try to build trust and psychological safety as well, in how you have those conversations. I think it's also important if the functional leader is having those with their team, I think it's also important to call out positional power as well. So, I do want your feedback, want it to be as honest and open as it can be. I think initially sometimes it takes time to build that trust.
Yeah.
Some people give it automatically. Other people, you have to earn it.
How do you get people to give you real responses to those questions?
I think it's not just taking the surface question as gospel. It's looking for those little cues, the body language, twitching the face, to probe a bit more. Having a look at the trends in the feedback as well. So if you've had a number of CBTs, it's, going back to make sure you've read the previous one. Is there any changes? If there's a change in score, why has it gone up? Why has it gone down? Things change in people's lives and the priorities change. So it's understanding why things are changing as well, and not being afraid, I guess, to ask, why is that? Or tell me more about that. Or, that score doesn't seem consistent with the feedback that you're giving as well. So
this is a face-to-face catch-up that you have with everybody in the business?
Yeah.
And how regularly do you guys do this?
So we started doing it every 3 months, and then we spanned it out into every 6 months.
Once every 6 months?
Yeah.
So a couple of those touch points a year?
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like a lot of work, or a reasonable amount of work, because there's a lot of people in the business.
Mm-hmm. So I don't do them all.
Yeah.
The other organisation I worked at with 40 people, I did them all.
Yeah.
But you could say it's a lot of time and it's a big investment. But I think what I've said to leaders is, would you not want that conversation with your leader at least twice a year, if not more? Is it any different to having a one-on-one with your team? So, you can have a regular one-on-one, which is maybe more operational focused, and then you just insert the CBT as part of that cadence, and focus more about the person and what's important to them.
And you made the point of cultural cohort earlier. What does that mean, or what does that look like at the RGT? So
initially we started with a cultural leader who facilitates the CBT.
Yeah.
And doing those with a group of people that didn't report to them. And what we wanted was a cross-sectional view of the whole organisation, not just a functional review. And we've recently changed that. So it's now functional leader does the CBT. The reason why we changed that was, I guess, we felt in a business our size that the functional leader has the most influence over somebody's experience. So for them to be able to hear the feedback, not that it wasn't shared when you had a cultural leader and a functional leader, and the cultural leader did the CBT, they would still share some of that information, but you're getting it secondhand.
Okay. So, a bit of rough maths here, but 230 employees, you've got 2 cultural touch points, at least 2 a year. There's 460 touch points that generate a data set.
Yep.
Sounds like a lot of data that's now being generated for you about your culture.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about the data. What does it tell you? What are you able to do with it? How do you utilize it?
Yeah. So the data, I guess the trends in data is really important. So, are things going up and down as well? And that being able to attract that at any point in time.
Can you give me an example of a trend that you might be referring to?
Sure. So, for example, feedback around training and career pathing.
Okay.
Excuse me. In our organisation has been a bit of a gap. So then we're able to go, well, what do we need to do, but also why is that happening? So what we found that because we did a lot of recruitment, people were training new people, and so therefore they weren't having the opportunity to cross-develop themselves because we had this new group of people coming in, and probably the most we've ever recruited in the history of the organisation. And so now that that's died down a bit, we can now start to focus on, well, what are those career paths and making sure that they're a little bit more transparent than what they have. So that's a piece of work that we'll be doing later on this year.
We like to use the term, and it sounds like we can apply it to this, is that data is giving you lead indicators to what's happening in the business.
Yeah.
And then you've got the ability to respond to those.
Yeah, and a lot quicker. So in other organisations I've worked at, you might do an annual engagement survey. You do the survey. You get the results back a couple months later. You look at the data, what's it telling us? We might need to do focus groups. By the time you do a focus group, it might be 3 to 6 months after the engagement survey. Some people have forgotten what they commented on. And then by the time you implement stuff, the question is, well, why are you implementing this sort of stuff? Is it important anymore? Because you might be 12 months down the track. Whereas this sort of data, it's live, it is a lead indicator.
How frequently do you look at it?
I look at it before every navigation meeting. So navigation meeting is the organisational leadership teams or the senior leadership team's ability to get together and have a look at, what we're focused on.
So is that your strategic leadership?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How often do you have them?
We have them every month.
Okay. So you would look at your real-time cultural data monthly.
Yeah.
And then does that give you inputs to take to that strategic leadership meeting?
Absolutely.
And then what do you as a strategic leadership team do with those inputs?
So we look at whether things are changing. So, excuse me, for example, what has the impact been on our recent salary increase? Financial is a gap that people are feeling because of the rising cost of living. How has the salary increase impacted that?
Okay.
I guess month to month that may not change dramatically because we're doing them every 6 months, but we're not doing them at the same time.
They're spread across
the year. Yeah.
So you have all of this rich real-time data that you look at frequently, and then you're identifying a gap or a differential in the data where you think we can do better. And then monthly you look at that and make strategic decisions on that. Then you pull a lever or implement something, and then again on a monthly basis thereafter you look to see if there's been a response in your action in the right direction.
Absolutely.
That's extremely, it sounds like it could be extremely powerful to do for an organisation your size, but will take serious diligence to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I guess the richness in the data is really in the comments.
Yeah.
And, that does take time to read it as well. Yeah, because you're reading 200 odd comments.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Though it is a lot. And, yeah, but it's what you get from that. It's definitely worth the investment.
Right. So the return, the richness of the insight that you're gaining is worth putting the time in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's some of the outcomes that ERGT is experiencing on the back of this commitment to culture and actually tracking the data of your culture?
So I guess we've been on this journey called like the ERGT way, as I mentioned, and we've also implemented and started using the OKRs.
Yep. And so just for reference, OKR is Objectives and Key Results Framework.
Yeah.
It's quite a famous strategic framework.
Yeah, and, a lot of organisations use KPIs instead. The KPIs measure activity, not necessarily the outcome. Yeah, so it's being more outcome focused.
Yep.
And I think as an organisation, we've been able to achieve some pretty big things that maybe we wouldn't have in the past.
Can you give me an example?
So at the moment, with the change in, I guess, employment legislation, we're moving from an old collective agreement into a new framework.
Yep.
And so to be able to have that quite transparent, to be able to show the team that's what we're working on. Anyone can go into the platform and have a look at what the objective is, how we're measuring it, what activity we've done. So that's a big one.
Well, so that's quite extreme transparency throughout the organisation around some of the biggest strategic projects that the team is working on.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does your people respond to that level of transparency?
I think some are not used to it. I know particularly some of the things that were shared in our employment relationship. I've heard feedback, teams talking, saying, well, if they can't promise this, why are they even talking about it? But we're wanting people to give their input into it so we can then make a decision and participate.
Okay.
I think a lot of organisations, their view on consulting is I've made a decision and my consulting bit is I'm telling you about it, rather than giving people the opportunity to actually lean into that topic and then make a decision.
Okay. So in an organisation as big as ERGT, how do you ensure that your employees feel valued and engaged?
I think it's about doing all those things to build trust and psychological safety, to try to encourage that culture of feedback as well. There's lots of training about how to give feedback, but it's how you receive feedback as well.
Yeah. So do you give people some training or some education around how to be open to feedback as well?
Yeah, we have. We've probably started with the leaders though. When we did the CBT training, like what are you going to do when you get some feedback? You're asking for feedback. You're saying, I understand I'm your leader, but I can't be the best leader I can unless you are courageous enough to give me some of that feedback. They will inevitably hear feedback that they don't like.
Yeah.
And how they react to that feedback is a real pivotal point, and it's a moment that matters, because if I give you feedback and you react to it, am I going to give it to you next time?
Well, I mean, that diminishes the psychological safety aspect of that engagement. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then as you guys are seeking such authentic feedback on how the business is performing on delivering on your people's desires or aspirations, have you had some data come back that was confronting or unexpected, or maybe showed that there was room for improvement more than what you expected? Anything?
Yeah, look, I think there's definitely always room for improvement. So we did a survey to ask people, do you understand why we do CBTs, for example? Do you feel like you're being open and honest? Do you understand what the motivators are? Because we wanted to make sure that people did.
That it was effective.
Yeah, that was effective. That I guess some of the questions were, has your feedback been acted on? Did you feel safe to give that feedback? Have you, heard nothing from it, or has it negatively impacted you? I think there was talk initially about the CBTs about, well, don't have a low score, because that might mean you have a target on your back if you give a low score.
Right. So there was a sentiment from people that if they say what they want to say and it results on a poor performance score on the business, that the business will then target them for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? Because that's a difficult thing to manage.
Yeah, it is. And I think it was in that survey, we also, I guess, took an opportunity to educate as well when we talked about the reasons for doing the CBT. And that those reasons were around, understanding what matters most, even if things are bad. Like, we want to know, how can we improve if we don't know? And a low score doesn't necessarily mean things are bad. It could be a reflection on trust and psychological safety. So a low score could mean we've got high trust because you're willing to tell us. A high score might actually mean there's low trust and psychological safety because people are just glossing over things and saying, yeah, it's all good, when it's really not. What's really important is the trends. So is it going up or is it going down? And we started with high scores for CBTs, and I said to the leaders, as we build trust, scores should probably go down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a true reflection that we are getting trust and psychological safety where people are being open and honest, and then we can actually really do some things if they are open and honest with us.
It's a fascinating trend that's supremely consistent because, I mean, I look at huge amounts of data sets for people's CV scores, and it's very common that when a new person starts in a business that there will be a score, whether it's high or low, but the following couple typically will drop off a bit before there's real progress. And I absolutely agree. They become more comfortable and feel more safe in the business to say what they actually feel.
Absolutely.
And trust that the business will seek to make improvements on that rather than, I guess, persecute them for being honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think one question I asked the leaders is, what's the perfect CBT score? And so, you know, scores were thrown out. You know, some, 60, 70, 80, whatever. And the answer is there's no perfect score. The perfect score is an honest score.
Yes. Okay, so I have an interesting question for you there in that sometimes you're not sure whether people feel safe enough to tell you the truth, and sometimes having a high score might actually mean that they're not honest, they're telling you what you want to hear, and other times a high score might mean somebody's extremely happy, and the inverse as well. Sometimes a low score might mean somebody's really unhappy or somebody's reasonably happy, but they're willing to give you the honest feedback. So now, how do you trust your data?
Good question. I guess it is about the trends and then looking at the comments as well. So it's not just taking the number, but also delving into that qualitative data.
Delving into what they said.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. But I think it's also letting leaders understand when you come to a score at the end of the CBT where it will sit in the orbit of, very happy to unhappy, so that if somebody's score is going to reflect a unhappy score, but all their comments indicate that they're really happy, it's just that ability to test that. And also showing people at the end of the CBT how their dot contributes to the overall, giving an indication of sort of, your comments would put you in this unhappy mode, but, you may be a low scorer. Some people are just, low scorers, but understanding.
Pretty cool.
Absolutely. Understanding, the impact that it would have on the outcome of their dot.
So it sounds like it would take some education and some leadership skills to capture and use the data in a smart way to serve the business, especially as a lot of that data is collected through at the functional leadership level and then ultimately makes it back to the strategic leadership team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you guys invest in the people that have got this cultural leadership responsibility?
We have. We could probably do more. We probably need a refresher, I think. And we've got, new leaders coming into the business or being promoted from within the business. So their experience has been as the employee as opposed to, facilitating that conversation. I won't take credit for this, but because it came from one of your coaches, but at the end of it, if you get 85% or more, we use a bullshit barometer. Okay. If I can use that word.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's just that ability to say, if it is 85%, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But it just gives you that opportunity to think about, is it really 8.5 out of 10 every day, every week? And it just gives somebody that opportunity to think about that.
So, sorry, help me understand this. So are you saying to apply the bullshit barometer, let's take the scenario of you and I are in this cultural catch-up and I'm the employee and you're my function leader or my cultural leader, and we've had the conversation and I've given you my scores and I've given you my comments, and the score totals at 85 or 86 or 90.
Yeah.
How do you apply the bullshit barometer?
How do I say it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say so 85%, that's really high. That shows that you're really happy, which is great if that's what you are. But I'm going to give you the opportunity, and I'm just going to call, if anything is 85 or more, call it a bullshit barometer. And it just gives us that opportunity to stop and pause and for you to think, is it really that high?
Is
consistent?
Actually how I feel most of the time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Most of the time. I could be having a great day, but the previous 3 weeks were not so great.
Right.
But I'm high on the day.
Do you get people adjust their scores after you give them the opportunity to?
Sometimes, probably more in the last organisation I worked at, because I did them all.
Okay.
We'd get to the end of it and they'd go, what's my score? Are you going to call bullshit?
So it became a bit of a in-joke.
Yeah, it did, yeah. But I guess it just gives that, that second to pause and
Right.
really consider, because sometimes people have a really bad day as well. So, if you as the cultural leader know somebody's had a bad day or bad week, is it the right time to do a CBT
Yeah.
as well? Should we have it next week
Yeah.
instead?
So that's quite a wise approach to take then to having a cultural conversation where you require somebody to be bold and trusting and honest, to know that some days might not be the right day because they have stuff that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
And they're just not in the headspace to give you a real answer.
Yeah, and I think as a leader, recognising that that's the space somebody might be in,
Life
and you've
happens
recognised
to us,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But also recognising that, then you've seen me in, what I'm going through this week or today, and you can call that out and acknowledge
That in itself is quite a powerful
Yeah,
practice.
absolutely. That you've recognised that.
Yeah. You see your people.
That's right. Yeah, you're in tune to them and can give them that breathing space to go, actually, this isn't the right time to sit down and do a CBT.
Yeah.
You actually snowed under, and would I give you the best of myself
Yeah.
in that conversation where my mind is elsewhere?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So it sounds like ERGT is making a significant investment in its people and the organization's culture. How do you see that reflect in we touched before on some of the great outcomes it can lead to for the business, but what are you seeing it doing for the individual people's performance and their success stories?
I think especially from a leader point of view, they're definitely more connected as a group of leaders, because we have taken them on that journey. There's a lot more cross-collaboration between those functional teams and leaders. It's built, because I've gone through that experience, it's built a level of trust amongst them as well, that I can go to a peer and share something that I'm going through, and I'm not going to be judged on, you should be a better leader than that, you should know better than that. So I think it has strengthened that cohort and that community. At the team member level, we're hoping that it has created that forum to build that trust, to then be able to perform better, because things can be improved as well. They're listened to.
Okay. Do you believe that this investment in culture and this investment into the people have a particular impact one way or the other on their individual journeys inside of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've got a great culture. People can recognise that. We've had, people leave the organisation thinking maybe the grass is greener, but they've come back.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So you have re-entries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would be your reflection on ERGT's retention of people currently, given it is a large organisation and it is a challenging industry?
Yeah.
How good or bad do you think it is, and why?
I think our retention is pretty good. I think that is because of the people that we have in there, and the people make the culture.
Okay.
And they feel more connected.
Yeah.
To that, and they value the purpose and the work that we do and what we do.
Yeah.
They can see the impact that it has. Ultimately, yes, we train people, but those people save lives.
Yeah.
So, we may not, as a trainer, be saving a life, but we are. The ripple effect
the people who do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so with some of these re-entry stories, has there been some interesting feedback that you got from some of those people that's cool to share?
Yeah, I guess it's probably, I left to go to an organisation for the money and very quickly found the culture and the leadership not so great. And then, really realised what I'd left. Called my boss. Boss's reaction was off the record. No, but yes, definitely. We'd have you back in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's funny, Doug, who's the founder of Sentient, a business whose building we're in, he's got some incredible stories of re-entries as well. People who were offered an opportunity that seemed like an opportunity you'd be mad to turn down, and they went for it, and they came back because of the culture in this business. So it seems to be extremely powerful. And what's an interesting metric for us when we look at a lot of SMEs cultural data is consistently the financial motivator is fourth most important or lower. Typically doesn't even make it into the top three.
Yeah.
Professional fit, personal fit, and cultural fit are typically the top three for most people.
Yeah. We would very similar. I think the cost of living, though, over the last couple of years has moved financial a bit higher.
Yep, we've seen that as well.
Yeah, and we did see that in the last business that I was into, and it was that cost of living pressure made it more. But we also believe that, all things, if there were two jobs and the finance was the same, the money was the same, it's that organisation that fits your internal motivators is going to make you stay and stick longer.
Yeah.
I guess at some point people often ask in a toxic culture, is the money worth it?
Yeah.
And usually it's not.
Yeah, okay. So I want to tap into something interesting with you. What if you identify a gap in the cultural data, whether it's for a team or for a person, and it's a gap that you can't close right now?
Mm-hmm.
What happens there? How do you handle it, and what's the result?
You have to be honest and say, look, I don't know, let's say you want to move into a new role that doesn't exist and the company is not going to have that. It's about being able to have those open and honest conversations, say, well, we'll never have that position in our organisation, so what next for you? And we want you to be happy, whether it's here or elsewhere.
Okay.
And so how can I help you? We're aiming, and we're trying to have more conversations around a high integrity exit.
Okay.
So, we can't be everything to everyone, and that's okay. But how can we help you and support you? If you're going to transition out of the business, it helps us plan. Yeah. We can start recruiting earlier.
You've got a earlier heads up to know that there's got to be a transition.
Yeah, that's right. But also, how can we help you? If you go apply for another job, to be able to give your current employee as a referee because you've been open and transparent, that speaks volumes to the next employer. To go, wow, that's amazing that your current boss knows you've been open and honest and they're willing to give you a reference.
They support you in this journey. Yeah.
You also then don't have to go, I'm sick today because you've got to go for an interview. You can be open. I'm going for an interview.
Is it okay?
Is that okay? It's at 10 o'clock, so I might come in late, rather than having to make up an excuse of why you can't be there at work at a certain time.
So what happens to your people when you're willing to go there to talk about this stuff, to be this honest about these things that typically you don't see in most organisations?
No. I think, that they become an advocate for you as an employer as well, outside of your organisation. Also gives them that insight into what a good company can be.
Yeah.
As well.
We often talk about people who leave your business on a high integrity exit will talk about your business as a wonderful place to be from.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're proud of the fact that they used to work with you.
Yeah.
Happy to tell the world that.
That's right. And, I think I had feedback, 2 weeks ago from an employee who has decided to leave us because we unable to offer her the position that, she's wanting in her career next. And she said, thanks for introducing this concept of the high integrity exit. I would not have been able to talk to my leader about my career and this is what I'm thinking of doing if we hadn't started talking about a high integrity exit and what it looks like.
Yeah.
So that was great.
That's amazing. That's such a powerful thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your workplace.
Yeah.
Michelle, I'd love to explore some key personal discoveries that you had on your cultural leadership journey.
Yes. I think for me, it's as a people and culture person, I come into an organisation and it could take me 6 to 12 months to really work out what's going on. For me, being able to do CBTs gives you the insight of what's really happening so much quicker, to be able to hear what matters to people, and therefore, what you create as a strategy, a people strategy, you can have a bigger impact, a quicker impact as well. But I think, a lesson that I learned, I was doing CBTs in an organisation for the whole organisation, and I had one person come in and say, nothing's been done since my last one. Have you even read my last CBT? Why are we even here? And I said to them, yeah, actually, that's a good point. I didn't read the last one that we did 4 months ago, and I should have. And that's my mistake, that I didn't do that, to then come into this conversation to say, so let's up front say you wanted this, 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 and we haven't delivered on any of that. We haven't even circled back to you.
What happened in that situation?
I think, he appreciated that I, admitted, yeah, you're right. I didn't read it. I should have read it.
Yeah.
I should have done what my role is.
Yeah.
And come back to you earlier.
Yeah.
Before, our next scheduled CBT. I think it shows as a leader, I can be vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
I'm human. I get caught up in the day-to-day stuff.
In the business stuff.
In the business stuff, yeah, exactly.
So I say this often to people who are thinking about applying type of cultural discipline like measuring your people's aspirations and what we do with this CV exercise. And I say to them, it's been our experience that if you know what your people want, what they aspire to you, and you're able to give it to them, why would they go anywhere else? And the inverse is also true. If your people want something or they aspire to something and they're not getting it at your workplace, why would they stay with you? But now there's a kicker, and your example touched on it. If you ask your people what they want and you don't do anything about it, they will leave you quicker.
Absolutely.
And so what I say often is that if you're going to measure your culture like this, there's no hiding.
No.
The data is there, and you ought to have the courage to do something about it. Otherwise, it will, if you don't act on what your people are saying to you, then you absolutely breach the trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's that measurement of, well, I told you and then you did nothing about it, so therefore why would I bother tell you again?
Yeah.
And so it is really key to building trust.
Yeah.
And it's even when you can't do something, but to be able to say, look, I'm sorry, we can't meet that.
Yeah. I've encountered so many business leaders who want to have a great culture in their business. And when I share with them the amount of work that I believe that goes into it, and the amount of work that customer businesses put into culture, it's very daunting. And I always say that if you genuinely want a healthy and thriving culture, it takes serious work, and the work never stops. You can never stop working on having a healthy culture.
But if you don't, your turnover and your people are going to cycle through. And so you would just spend time in recruiting and training and retraining.
Yeah.
And that team having to reform every time a new person comes in and putting more pressure on the team because they have to train another person and another person and another person. So it's almost switching where you're spending your energy on to trying to prevent or encouraging people to stay.
And the psychological cost and the commercial cost to the business and the people for the latter is way worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. And more costly.
Absolutely. I want you to tell me about this people and culture leaders community of practice that you started.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is something that organically happened.
Yeah, organically happened. And I guess the reason why it happened was I know you do owners forums.
Yeah.
And even when I was in the last organisation, I said, I would really like to go on the owners forum because, our owner or founder at the time really wasn't involved in a lot of the day-to-day operation. And as our senior leadership team, it's like, well, we almost played that role of an owner, but we don't. So it would be great to have a community of, leaders that maybe aren't the founder, but can still connect to that. And then I was at one of your co-innovation dinners and it got brought up. And Jillian said to me, I would love it if you would organise something like that. I said, I would be happy to. Yeah. So we've had 2 meetings so far. So it's, I guess, anyone who has that people and culture hat on in their business is welcome to come.
Yeah.
And it's just us sharing, what we're doing, what we've done, where are our challenges, what are the tools that we're using, and what success have we had. Maybe what are the tools that we're not using or we want to, but maybe there's reasons why we haven't been able to use them, and just sharing that experience. So it's been a great group. We pick the topics that we're going to talk about, pick the time, pick the venue. It's all very...
How frequently do you guys catch up?
Every month.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've done 2. We've got another one next week.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
And so it's primarily businesses who are in the ADAPT community. Would you be open to people who are people and culture leaders who are not in the community but who'd want to learn from you guys or share with you guys? Would you be open to a reach out and maybe show them what you do?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I guess within that community as well, we've helped each other out as well on more, I guess, the technical HR stuff that we're experiencing.
I just think, the stories that I've heard from the 2 catch-ups that you guys have had has been so impactful because it's a tricky discipline, making sure your people are looked after and being able to learn from other people. How have they solved some of the challenges or what are some of the creative ways in which they attack the work is very valuable to people that have to do that in their SMEs. Yeah.
And often I think in an SME, you're the only people and culture person. So you don't have a team that you can talk to about that people and culture stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really good to have a network that you can get help from.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the owners that frequently attend the Owner Leader Forum, and this forum was specifically created to give a place for SME owners to connect with other owners to talk about ownership challenges. And that was our first foray into creating some community forums. And one of the founders that come to that referred to it as it's like a therapy session for founders, where you can go and get a group hug from other people who have the same challenges. Yeah. And I'm sure it would be quite similar for you. Yeah. Brilliant. So I'd like to explore if you've got any stories or interesting stories or examples of a leadership challenge that you faced in your professional journey, and how you've had to navigate through that particular challenge.
Yeah, I think I guess there's lots, but as a particular leadership challenge, it's around the people that I lead as well, whether there's behavioural issues or performance issues or just that misalignment or team conflict. I think it's, you would think as a, people and culture person who's partnering with other leaders and giving them advice that I should have this down pat.
Yeah.
but I'm also an S in the DISC profile, so I don't really like conflict. Right. And so, it's hard. It's tough to have those conversations. I remember, quite a few years ago now, I had somebody on performance management and, they got through it, but a few months later, started again. And I said to her, I said, I thought we were okay, we were making progress and, I've given you feedback and we're sort of back here again. I said, let's talk about why. And she just said to me, she goes, you just rabbit on too much. I missed the point because you pat it, you say some stuff and then you give me the feedback and then you say some other stuff. I just want you to be direct with me. And sort of that was, for me, was about really understanding, the differences in people and how they need to be communicated to. It's not about me, it's about that person and really understanding them a bit more. And that for me, for her to say, you just rabbit on too much. That was really brave of her to say that.
Yeah. But
for me, that lesson that I learned, and so from then on, it was, whenever I'd have a new team or have somebody new join the business, one of my first questions would be, how do you like to get feedback? Whether it's good, bad, now's a good time to talk about it because I don't have any feedback for you, but I want to know how
do you receive feedback so that it lands?
Yeah.
And for you to recognize that your natural state in communication might be averting confrontation, whereas in this scenario, the person that you were giving feedback to needed the direct confrontational approach for it to land.
Yeah.
And for them to connect with it.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, that's a wonderful lesson. I was actually had this conversation earlier today where when I was a bit younger and in a leadership position, I thought I was killing it at being a great team leader and being humble and approachable and all that. And then whenever I had to do sort of frequent performance feedback and performance reviews with the team, I would always ask them to give me a performance review. And only one had the courage to. And the feedback was that I'm not approachable and I'm very blunt and direct. And it was a big hit to my ego and it took me a little while to understand the lesson in that, to be mindful of what's my natural state.
Yeah.
And how can I adapt the natural state when I'm communicating with somebody so we can have a meaningful conversation?
Yeah. And I do think the higher you go in an organisation, the less feedback you actually get about you, because people, there's a fear to give feedback because of this position that you hold.
Yeah.
And it is about how you are seeking and ask for that feedback and practicing that. I'm always asking for feedback. And
so as a leader, how do you overcome that?
So you could say to somebody, do you have any feedback, or how do you think that went? And often people will go, oh, no, everything was fine. A slight changing language could be, what's one thing that I could have done differently? Or what's one thing that went well? What's one thing that could have done better? And by asking somebody one thing, you're setting an expectation that I want one thing at least.
Yeah.
Rather than how did it go? All good.
Yeah. So I think that practice of giving them some parameters that they can go, okay, well, I can handle one thing, is effective. I like to apply a plus and delta approach whenever I seek feedback, and I know you guys do as well, where when you ask a person or a group for some feedback, I always ask them, give me one plus, or one thing that you felt was good, one thing, and one thing you think can improve.
Yeah.
And that seems to elicit a higher success rate in responses and real responses. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's also, as you're creating that environment, it's looking for things that are maybe a bit safer for somebody to give feedback on, so they just get used to giving feedback. So it could be, how do you think what's one thing about this meeting that went really well?
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not as personal or confronting, but you're practicing giving feedback.
Awesome. My next question is, any epic fails that you've had to learn from? So you gave one example. I don't know if there's maybe any other ones that...
I think nothing in particular that I can think of, but I know there's definitely been times when I have reacted poorly as a leader, and it plays on your mind. And I think it's that first knowing and, I guess being a bit forgiving of yourself, but then it's also manning up, I guess, and going back to that person and say, I probably wasn't in my best moment or my best day. I know I could have done better, and I apologise for that. I think, we're human. We have our moments, but to be able to own it and call that out and say, look, I'm sorry. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think you're saying it takes work to become match fit to be able to own up when you've had a less than positive response?
It's so much easier just to walk past it and just, time will heal it.
Yeah.
But it also, you've got big responsibility as a leader as well. People expect more.
So how then do you hold yourself accountable to live up to it, do the things that needs to be done?
I guess, but like what I said, is like recognising those moments when you haven't been on your game, asking for feedback, admitting, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. I'm going to need your help.
See, that's an extraordinary, powerful thing that I really only recently are starting to appreciate. I come from a culture where status was important and being high performing, and that can diminish your courage to admit that you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really only later in my life when I've become comfortable with saying, I don't know. But I've had some stories from leaders that's been extremely powerful in when you're willing to admit to your people, as a leader or as a person that maybe should know, to be honest and say, I don't know the answer, because it unblocks the opportunity to collaborate around finding it.
I think it also shows some strength as well to be able to say, I don't know, rather than this facade that you do. Because I think ultimately when you don't and you're pretending that you do, people know. They work it out.
I think you're right.
You might be fooling some, but you're not fooling everyone.
That's right. We're not as good pretenders as we like to be. Rochelle, finally, have you got a great tip for anybody who wants to build a long-term resilient business?
I think you need to be very clear on, what your purpose and your strategy is, what your values are, but you need to constantly communicate them all the time. You hear people say all the time, oh, but I've told them. Well, you need to keep telling them because they won't remember. Particularly when, particularly if you're going through lots of change, the cognitive ability for somebody going through change is equivalent to about a 7-year-old. So you need to tell them and tell them and tell them, and not just verbally. You need to tell them in as many different forms as possible. I was at a leadership lunch this is many years ago, and that leader said, if ever I'm talking to a group of 2 or more people, it's my opportunity to talk about where we're headed as an organisation. I just constantly
reinforce.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a really powerful recommendation, is as leaders get better at our communication.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, the work never stops. You can never stop.
No, that's right. And you've had, as a leader or as a leadership team where you're talking about things, you've had a long time to talk about it, think about it, and then understand it. And you've got to that point, and now you're telling the team for the first time. They haven't been on that same journey as you, and you've got to take them on that. And that's why that constant reminding is really important.
Awesome. Rochelle, thank you very much. It's been an amazing privilege to have you here to talk culture with you.
Thanks for making me feel comfortable.
Look, I appreciate you sharing authentically about the good stuff, the challenging stuff. I think there's a lot of wisdom there for our listeners and viewers to share from. I'm wishing you all the best for all the great things that's in your and ERGT's future. And
Thank you.
Just love to keep watching how you guys evolve. So
Absolutely.
thank you very much.
No, thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it.